Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I think it's going to be an exciting few days, and I'm so happy to see everyone here, and it's been wonderful to get your submissions and just thinking through the program. You know, I'd like to begin actually with the story of the poster. I was thinking of how I would deal with this introduction. It was quite hard to think what picture, what image would capture, what does it mean to say tacit engagement in the digital age? One of our music PhD students here, Michael Byrne, had been working with prima ballerinas of the Royal Ballet who had long retired and were now in their 70s and early 80s. And I had in my mind a memory of a video that he showed us, which was so beautiful. It showed one of these former prima ballerinas dancing with the current prima ballerina of the Royal Ballet, teaching her some movements of a dance that was no longer performed, and where there was very little video footage. And as she moved with her, her movements were full of grace. You know, she had her person within her movements. While the prima ballerinas were skillful with technique, but her person still needed to come within them. And for Polanyi, who coined the expression tacit knowing or tacit knowledge, in his seminal work, The Tacit Dimension, the 1960s, tacit knowledge is a personal act of knowing, and it has a mediational structure. What does this mean? Many of us are familiar with the expression, you know, you can't see the wood for the trees. So we have an awareness of the trees in order to attend to the wood. But these are two levels, and you cannot separate them in order to perceive and make sense. And Polanyi called this relationship between the two levels that form tacit knowing a comprehensive entity. And he said that when two people share the knowledge of the same comprehensive entity, i.e. they share tacit knowledge, then such comprehensive entities include, apart from our own performance, both the performance of the other person and these persons themselves. And I think that's very important, given our world today, this aspect of the person. And in this poster picture, the experienced ballerina, who is in her late 70s, is moving with the algorithmic representation and reproduction of her movements. What does this implicate for her tacit knowing? In our everyday performances with others, including what I'm doing now with you, it's possible to claim that self cannot be separated from interaction, myself from you, the audience. And were you all to suddenly be algorithmic versions of my temporality, my sensory awareness, and the patterns of the contours and textures of my body and voice, how would this differ from how I'm experiencing your performance as an audience now? These are issues for our engagement with the artificial reproduction of human behavior. And then there are the growing virtual worlds we inhabit with others, moving between physical and online presence. Last night, in a discussion over dinner, Gill, who's going to be introducing the next session, speaking with us later, was speaking about how her children are moving seamlessly between virtual games between the physical and the online worlds. Well, who's driving the design of these technologies? What are the shifts that are taking place? And are they desirable? How are they, and how will they affect cultural practices of the future? And perhaps the concept of intersubjectivity, which is often used to think about developing friendly, understanding, empathetic, and more human-centered systems, might have constraints that are not necessarily helpful, because it's based on the projection of self, or placing ourselves in others' shoes and understanding how we would react if we were that person. And concepts of sympathy and empathy tend to be rooted in this identity transference, as Hall called it, that assumes or necessitates a sameness of culture. It's not about engaging with difference. It doesn't question the algorithm. And here I was just thinking of an example from my time in Japan, where I had a colleague who I would talk about very complex ideas with, me in my broken Japanese and he in his broken English. And yet we were able to communicate ideas and almost finish each other's sentences. Then he was sent by the research company to work in an international division just to do simple video conferencing with clients in the US. This wasn't complex information that he was dealing with. It was just transactional stuff. But he said to me, I don't understand what they're saying. I do not know what they want from me. I do not know how to respond. So it's almost as if the complexity of the communication was reduced such that his cultural practice, his ways of being with another person, he was unable to perform. So he can see the people, it's no problem, he can hear them, they're full-bodied. So what is that? What is that about sharing a space with another person at the physical level that is more than about seeing and hearing? Tacit knowledge as a concept has been at the fore of discussions around the sociology of scientific knowledge of AI, and we're going to hear Harry Collins at the end of these 3 days. And it's been widely spoken about in discussions about the limits of AI, and most recently the design of collective intelligence, and we will have Jeff Mulligan talking about that as our keynote this morning. In the 1980s, that was when I was first introduced to the notion of tacit knowledge. And at that time, I had the privilege of being invited to participate in a conference in Scandinavia in 1988. It was a fascinating time because the Scandinavians had been introducing and implementing all sorts of AI-based systems, knowledge bases, expert systems, computer assistants, in virtually every part of their working life, from public industry to private corporations. I came away with some images, some stories, and one of them really hit me quite deeply. It was about mathematicians working in the forestry industry who had worked with computer scientists to develop these algorithms which would do calculations, supposedly just to use an assistant to check against your calculations. And over a period of 7 years, these mathematicians began to doubt their own judgments. So they began to go to the machine, and then, they didn't trust themselves. Why is that interesting? It's interesting because making judgments with certainty involves doubt. And sometimes when one thinks about certainty, one forgets that. And one designs machines and systems with a certainty that is not a human certainty. So yes, it's... And in some ways, in the 1980s also, you had a lot of discussions around computers for social responsibility in the US, participatory design in Scandinavia. In the UK, you had human-centered systems movement, and the AI and Society Journal emerged out of that. Yet, the technology is here with us now. All the discussions that they were talking about then, about the impact on society, upon how we engage with technology, upon the effects on our capacities to make judgments, the questions are still here, and if anything, they're even more pertinent now. It's perhaps quite timely that right at the same moment that we are here now in the Victoria and Albert Museum, in these 2-3 days, they are having a conference on the future of tacit knowledge for the crafts, because they are concerned about the effect on craft knowledge. So this issue of the tacit is now concerning a lot of people. And in this conference, our concern is with the future where our lives are increasingly augmented by AI algorithms. The exponential rise of big data flows and network communication is causing vast gaps in translation, and we have a confusion about truth and falsity. We mistrust experts. And in the shadows of machine thinking, I was inspired by this by Dietrich Brandt's talk or paper on Plato's cave. We're unable to engage with difference. This problem of engaging with difference is really problematic for us now. And it really challenges us now to come up with futures rooted in us as people, not as numbers, parts, sensory mechanisms, genes, and individual bodies, but as persons. But how do we do that? So our speakers are going to reflect on the key questions raised for this conference, on the alternative models that will allow us to better engage with technology and each other. How can we consider the relation between a person and a collective intelligence, and to reconceive the self as interaction? And there's a supposed neutrality around technology. And the conference explores so, you know, human intelligence can be artificially represented, reconstructed, and reproduced. So we're going to explore the interplay between the arts and sciences and reconceiving what we mean by augmentation and questioning what intelligence is and what artificial might be. So I'm very excited, and I hope that you will all enjoy the discussions, and please ask lots of questions. Do not hesitate. I will pass the floor now on to Gill, who will chair the next session. Gill will be speaking with us at the end of the day. We're going to have a very exciting session with Gill. Okay.